Clara Weston pressed her last 11 cents against her palm until the copper bit into her skin. 3 days without a real meal. 2,000 miles from everything she'd ever known. And not a single soul in Stillwater Creek who knew her name or cared whether she lived past sundown. She didn't cry. She'd stopped crying somewhere around Kansas. When the tall rancher stepped around her on the general store steps and asked if he could buy her something, she did the only thing left that still belonged to her. She laughed. And Elijah Dawson never recovered from the sound. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to our channel and follow Clara's journey to the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Elijah Dawson had ridden into Stillwater Creek for salt blocks and nothing else. That was what he told himself as he tied his horse outside Brennan's general store. That was what he'd been telling himself for 8 years now, that his trips to town were practical matters, simple transactions, reasons to exchange currency for goods and then disappear, back to the quiet of his ranch on the ridge. He was 44 years old. He owned 600 acres of good Texas hill country, a respected horse operation, and a hound named Captain, who had survived 2 rattlesnake bites and showed no intention of dying anytime soon. But Eli had no wife. He'd had one briefly. Margaret. The town had learned not to speak her name around him, not because he grew angry, but because something happened in his face when they did. Something quiet and unfinished that made people feel they'd opened a door they had no right to open. That was 8 years ago. 8 years of riding into town for salt blocks, flour, lamp oil. 8 years of nodding at neighbors and keeping conversations short. 8 years of building something with his hands because his hands needed building to do, and the alternative was thinking too much about the silence in the house where a woman's voice used to be. He stepped up onto the boardwalk and stopped. There was a woman sitting on the steps of Brennan's. Not begging, that was the first thing he noticed. She wasn't holding out her hands or making her circumstances into a performance. She sat with her spine straight and her hands folded in her lap, watching the street with the patience of someone watching weather pass. Just present. Just still. Her dress had been fine once. Eli could read that in the cut of it, the particular shape of the collar even beneath the dust, and the road wear, and the careful amateur mending along one sleeve. Her boots were worn through at the heel. Her hair was dark and pinned loosely, and there was something about her face. He looked away. None of his business. He stepped around her to reach the door. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't look up, didn't shift to make room. She simply continued her quiet observation of the street as though he were weather too passing through. Inside, Gus Brennan looked up from behind the counter with the permanent squint of a man who'd spent 60 years reading ledgers in bad light. Eli, salt blocks. 2. Gus nodded and disappeared into the back storeroom. Through the front window, Eli could see the woman on the steps. She hadn't moved. A young boy, couldn't have been more than 6, had approached her with something in his outstretched hands. A half-eaten biscuit. The offering of a child who'd decided this stranger mattered. She took it graciously, said something to the boy that Eli couldn't hear. Whatever it was made the child grin wide enough to show missing teeth, and he ran back to his mother with the particular joy of someone who'd just done a good thing and wanted credit for it. She ate the biscuit slowly, without embarrassment, without performance. And then she looked up directly at the window, directly at Eli, and he realized he'd been caught staring. He turned away. Gus returned with the salt blocks wrapped in burlap. "That'll be 4 bits. Eli paid without conversation. He collected his purchase, loaded it onto his horse, and was fully prepared to ride south and return to the uncomplicated silence of his ranch. He stopped 3 feet from the steps. The woman had a small leather satchel beside her now. It was buckled carefully, the only thing about her circumstances that suggested someone who still believed in order, in keeping things arranged, in maintaining dignity when dignity was all that remained. Eli was not a man who spoke without reason. He stood there long enough that it probably looked strange, and then he said the only thing his mind had apparently decided on without consulting him first. "Can I buy you something?" It came out flat, practical, the way he might tell his horse to hold still. He meant it as an offer of a meal, a simple human gesture, the kind of thing decent people did for other people in difficulty. That was all. The woman turned and looked at him fully for the first time. And then she laughed. Not a short sound, not polite, not the restrained acknowledgement of someone managing an awkward moment. She laughed the way people laugh when something has struck them as genuinely, completely, unexpectedly funny. Head tilting, one hand rising briefly toward her mouth, eyes creasing at the corners. It lasted only a few seconds, but it was completely unguarded. It transformed her face into something that Eli found deeply, uncomfortably disorienting. He had not made a woman laugh in a very long time. He wasn't entirely sure what had just happened. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice was clear and measured with an accent that didn't match Stillwater Creek or anywhere else in Texas. "That came out differently than you meant it." "I meant a meal," Eli said. "I know." She looked at him with eyes that were brown and sharp and tired and amused all at once. "That's not why I laughed." He waited. She didn't explain. This bothered him more than he expected. "The offer stands," he said. She studied him for a moment. That same patient observation he'd noticed before. Watching him the way she'd watched the street. Not suspicious. Not grateful. Just present. "There's a bench outside Miller's," she said finally. "I'll accept coffee, if it's still being offered." It was a careful answer. Measured. The response of someone who had learned to accept things without surrendering anything in the process. Eli tied his horse's lead to the post and followed her down the street. He was already aware that he had stepped into something he did not yet have the shape of. Her name, she told him, was Clara. She offered it simply without a surname, and he didn't press. He gave her his Elijah Dawson the Ridge 600 acres horses, and she nodded as though filing it somewhere useful, but not urgent. The coffee at Miller's was strong and bitter the way Texas coffee usually was, and she drank it without complaint. "You've been in town long?" he asked. 4 days. "Where before that?" She turned the cup slowly in both hands. "East." It was a word shaped like a closed door. Eli recognized the shape of it. He'd used that shape himself when people asked about certain years, certain names, certain rooms in his house that stayed shut. He let it sit. "You have people here?" he asked instead. "No." "Work?" "Not yet." There was no self-pity in the way she said it. That was the thing that kept pulling at him. She spoke about her situation the way someone speaks about weather, acknowledging the rain without pretending it wasn't happening, but not drowning in it either. "Gus might need someone," Eli said. "Brennan, at the general store." "The man with the ledgers. You noticed his ledgers?" "I noticed he's added a column of figures 3 times since I've been sitting on his steps. Came out different each time." Eli looked at her. "I'm good with numbers," she said. Simply, without boasting. "My father made sure of that." "Gus is terrible with numbers." I noticed. Something shifted at the edge of her expression. Not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. "I'll speak to him," she said. They sat for perhaps 20 minutes. The conversation moved in short passages, with silences between that were not uncomfortable. This surprised Eli, because silences with people he didn't know usually felt like obligations he wasn't meeting. When she finished her coffee, she set the cup down squarely and said, "Thank you, Mr. Dawson." Eli. She considered that briefly, like it was a contract she was being asked to sign. "Thank you, Eli." She picked up the satchel she'd set beside her chair, stood with the same straight-backed composure he'd noticed on the steps, and looked at him one more time. "You asked if you could buy me?" she said. "That's funny to me for a reason I won't explain yet." Eli waited. "But the coffee was kind. I don't forget kind." Then she walked back toward Brennan's. Unhurried. the worn heel of her boot making a quiet, uneven sound on the boards. For a reason I won't explain yet. That word had not been an accident. Eli was certain of it. And he was equally certain, in a way he hadn't felt about anything in longer than he could honestly name, that he wanted to know what she meant by it. He left a coin on the table, untied his horse, and started south toward the ridge. He made it about 50 yards before he realized he'd left the salt blocks leaning against Miller's bench. He stopped in the street. His horse turned his head and regarded him with the expression of an animal who had seen this kind of thing before and had stopped being surprised by it. Eli did not go back for the salt blocks that same afternoon. He told himself it was because the ride back to the ridge before dark was more practical than retracing 40 feet of boardwalk. He told himself these things with the particular conviction of a man who knows he's constructing an excuse but hasn't yet decided to admit it. That night he sat on the porch of his cabin and watched the valley below settle into purple dusk. Captain lay at his feet with the philosophical exhaustion of a hound who'd spent the day managing important hound business. The horse operation was quiet. The tools were put away. The summer heat was finally loosening its grip as evening came on. It was the same evening he had spent 1,000 times on this ridge, comfortable in its sameness. Except that tonight, the quiet felt like it was waiting for something. For a reason I won't explain yet. He didn't know her surname. He didn't know what East meant, or how long 4 days in Stillwater Creek had actually cost her, or why a woman who carried herself like old money was sitting on general store steps with mended sleeves and worn-out boot heels. He knew the coffee had been accepted without performance. He knew she'd made that boy grin. He knew her laugh had been completely unexpectedly real. Small things. He was aware they were small things. He went to bed at his usual hour and slept without difficulty. He was back in Stillwater Creek by Friday noon. The salt blocks, he told Gus Brennan, who nodded without particular interest. Clara was not on the steps of the general store. Eli collected the salt blocks, took his time about it, walked to Miller's for coffee he didn't especially need. He sat at the same bench as the day before. The street moved through its ordinary Friday business. A wagon delivering feed to the livery. 2 women talking outside the dress shop. A dog sleeping in a patch of shade with the absolute commitment only dogs manage. No Clara. He finished the coffee, stood, and nearly walked directly into her coming around the corner from the alley beside Brennan's. She stopped. He stopped. There was a brief moment of mutual surprise that stripped them both of whatever composure they'd been carrying. "Mr. Dawson?" "Eli." The corner of her mouth moved. "Eli." She was carrying a small ledger under one arm and had ink on the side of her right hand, a dark smudge below the knuckle of her little finger. Her hair was pinned more neatly than the day before. "Brennan took you on," he said, "yesterday afternoon." She looked at the ledger with an expression that was somewhere between professional and exhausted. "His books are optimistic. He charged me twice for a bridle last spring. He's charged 4 different customers for the same barrel of rope over 3 years. None of them noticed." Eli looked at her. "You found that in 1 day. I find things quickly." It wasn't a boast. It was delivered the same way she delivered everything, plainly as simple information without decoration. "Have you eaten today?" he said. They went back to Miller's. She ordered eggs and bread this time, and ate with the same unhurried composure she brought to everything. Eli drank coffee and asked no questions, and waited. He had decided somewhere between the ridge and the valley floor that the correct approach to Clara, he still didn't know her surname, but he'd stopped needing one, was patience. She was the one who opened something first. "You live alone on that ridge," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." By preference or circumstance? It was direct. More direct than most people ventured with him. He considered it honestly. Both. At different times. She nodded slowly, as though that answer confirmed something she'd already suspected. Then she looked out at the street. "I had a house once," she said. "Back east. Larger than most people in this town have ever seen. Staff. A library with more books than any school here probably owns." She said it without nostalgia, without grief, without pride, just as fact. "I'm not telling you to impress you. I'm telling you so you understand why I laughed." Eli set down his cup. "When a man asks if he can buy you something," she continued, "and you once had a library worth more than his entire ranch." She glanced at him. "The question lands funny." "No offense taken." "None should be given for the laughing." "None taken," he said again. He wanted to ask what happened to the house, the library, all of it. He could feel the question sitting right at the front of his mouth, patient and ready. He left it there. She would tell him or she wouldn't. He understood with a certainty he couldn't have explained that pressing Clara would be the fastest way to lose whatever this was, and he did not want to lose it. That realization arrived with the particular weight of something that had been true for longer than he'd noticed. Over the next 2 weeks, Eli found reasons to come down from the ridge that he would not have found before. A new cinch strap. Conversation with the feed supplier that could have waited a month. Medicine for Captain that Widow Cole insisted wasn't urgent, but he purchased anyway. He did not examine these reasons too closely. His horse seemed to have developed an opinion about the frequency of the trips, but kept it to himself. Clara had taken a room above the dress shop, a small arrangement with Widow Harriet Cole, who charged fair rent and asked no personal questions. Clara had apparently identified this as the most important qualification. She worked Brennan's books every morning. By the end of the first week, she had corrected 14 months of errors and organized his inventory system into something Gus described to anyone who would listen as a genuine miracle, though he said it in the tone of a man slightly embarrassed by how much he'd needed one. Eli and Clara had coffee on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It was an arrangement that had never been spoken aloud but had simply settled into place. Not decided, just understood. She told him pieces. Not the whole, never the whole yet, but pieces. Her father had built something significant in Charleston. She had grown up with the particular education that wealthy Southern families gave their daughters in that era. Music, languages, figures, letters. When her father died, there had been a man, a husband. She called him Edward once, and then never again, only he after that, as though she had quietly revoked his right to a name. The husband had been charming and financially catastrophic, in ways that revealed themselves slowly like a leak in a roof that only showed itself in the worst weather. "I chose him in grief," she said one Thursday, turning her coffee cup slowly in both hands. "That's a specific kind of terrible logic, mistaking decisiveness for wisdom." She said none of this with bitterness. That was what Eli kept returning to alone on the ridge at night, the absence of bitterness. She had been taken apart by circumstances that would have corroded most people into anger and suspicion. And she sat across from him at Miller's and talked about it the way someone talks about a road they'd already walked, not happy about the distance, but done with the walking. He admired it. That admiration made him uncomfortable because it required acknowledging how much he'd stopped expecting from people. It was on the third Thursday that she asked about Margaret. Not cruelly, not nosily. She asked the way she asked everything directly, as though she'd decided the question was fair and was prepared to accept whatever came back. "You were married?" she said. "Yes." "What happened?" Eli looked at his coffee for a long moment. "Childbirth," he said. "Summer of '68. She was gone by morning. The baby didn't make it either." He paused. "Her name was Margaret." Clara was quiet for a moment. "That's the kind of loss that changes the shape of a person," she said. "Yes." She didn't say she was sorry. He was grateful for that. Sorry was a word people used when they didn't know what else to offer. Instead, she said, "Margaret would have found Captain amusing." Eli looked up. "You've mentioned him 4 times," Clara said. "There's something in how you say his name." He was quiet for a moment. Then something happened in his face that hadn't happened in front of another person in a very long time. Something loosened. Just slightly. "She would have," he said. "She had a weakness for stubborn things." Clara smiled. A full one. Not the edge of one. Not almost. A real, complete smile that arrived without warning and sat on her face with the ease of something entirely at home there. Eli looked at it for a moment too long. She noticed. She didn't look away. That evening, riding back toward the ridge, Eli passed the spot on the North Trail where you could look back and see the whole of Stillwater Creek laid out below the lights coming on one by one. The smoke from the supper fires, the dress shop on the east end of Main Street. He stopped his horse there and looked for longer than he had any practical reason to. Somewhere in that pattern of lights, Clara was in a small room above Widow Cole's shop. Reading, probably. Or writing in that ledger with her careful, precise hand. She had said Margaret's name. Nobody said Margaret's name anymore. The town had quietly retired it out of kindness that had slowly begun to feel more like erasure. Clara had said it plainly. Like it belonged in the conversation. Like Margaret was allowed to still exist in the present tense. His horse shifted weight and exhaled. "I know," Eli said quietly. He turned toward home, but something about the direction felt different now. Not wrong, just different. Like a room you've lived in for years, where someone has moved one small thing, and suddenly the whole space has a different quality of light. He wasn't sure yet what to do with that, but for the first time in 8 years, he wasn't sure he wanted to do nothing. The letter arrived on a Monday. Eli didn't know about it yet, wouldn't know for 3 more days. But it had been delivered to Brennan's with the afternoon post, addressed in a hand that Clara recognized immediately. A hand from Charleston. A hand that belonged to a lawyer who represented the estate of Edward Weston. A hand that meant her past had finally inevitably caught up with her. She stood in the back room of the general store, holding the envelope, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet for the first time since she'd arrived in Stillwater Creek. Gus called from the front. "Miss Clara customer needs help with the yard goods." She folded the letter without opening it, put it in her pocket, walked back to the counter, smiled at the customer, and told herself she'd deal with it later. Later. That word had gotten her through 2,000 miles. It would get her through this too. It had to. Clara waited 3 days before opening it. 3 days of smiling at customers. 3 days of correcting Gus Brennan's arithmetic. 3 days of sitting across from Eli Dawson at Miller's and pretending that the weight in her pocket wasn't slowly crushing her from the inside out. On Thursday morning, before the store opened, she sat in the back room with the envelope in her hands and finally broke the seal. The words swam in front of her eyes. Outstanding debts. Estate of Edward Weston. Legal obligation. Failure to appear. She read it twice, then a third time. Then she folded it carefully, placed it back in her pocket, and walked to the front of the store as though nothing had happened. Gus looked up from the counter. "You all right, Miss Clara? You look pale." "Fine," she said. "Just the heat." It wasn't a lie, not entirely. The July heat had been building for days now, pressing down on Stillwater Creek like a hand holding the town under water. But the heat wasn't what had drained the color from her face. Edward's debts. She had thought they were settled. She had sold everything: the house, the furniture, the silver, her mother's jewelry. She had paid what she could and walked away from what she couldn't. She had been told it was finished. She had been told wrong. The letter named a sum that might as well have been $1 million for all the chance she had of producing it. And if she couldn't produce it, if she couldn't appear in Charleston to settle the matter, there would be consequences. Legal consequences. The kind that followed a person. The kind that didn't care how far west you ran. She was still standing behind the counter staring at nothing when the door opened and Eli Dawson walked in. He stopped when he saw her face. "Clara." "Eli." She forced a smile. "Coffee day." "What's wrong?" "Nothing." He looked at her the way he looked at everything steady, patient, missing nothing. "Try again?" "It's nothing you can help with." Didn't ask if I could help. Asked what was wrong. She felt something crack inside her. Just slightly. Just enough to let something leak through that she'd been holding back. "Can we walk?" she said. They walked to the edge of town, past the livery, past the blacksmith, to where the buildings thinned out and the open country began. Clara didn't speak until they'd left the last of the town noise behind them. "I got a letter," she said. "From Charleston, a lawyer." She looked at the horizon. Edward's debts weren't settled. There's more. More than I knew about. More than I can pay. Eli was quiet for a moment. "How much?" "Doesn't matter. I don't have it." "How much, Clara?" She told him. He didn't flinch. Didn't whistle. Didn't make any of the sounds people make when they hear a number that's larger than they expected. "What happens if you don't pay?" he asked. "They'll come after me. Legally. My name attached to his debts, his creditors, his—" She stopped, took a breath. "I thought I was done with him. I thought 2,000 miles was far enough." "It's never far enough," Eli said quietly. "Not from the things that matter." She looked at him. "Speaking from experience. Maybe." They stood there for a moment. The wind moved through the grass, hot and dry. "I could lend you the money," Eli said. Clara turned sharply. "No." "Clara." "No." She said it harder this time. "I didn't tell you so you'd offer to fix it. I told you because—" She stopped. Because I wanted someone to know. In case—" She didn't finish. "In case what?" "In case I have to leave." The words hung in the air between them. Eli's face did something she hadn't seen before. A tightening around the eyes. A stillness that went deeper than his usual stillness. "You're thinking of running," he said. "I'm thinking of surviving. There's a difference. There has to be." He took a step closer. Not threatening, not aggressive, just closer. "You've been running for 2 years, Clara. How's that been working? Better than staying. Has it?" She didn't answer. "You've got a job here," he said. "A room. People who—" He stopped himself, started again. "You've got a place here. That means something. It means something until that letter catches up with me, until someone shows up asking questions, until this town finds out that the woman doing Gus Brennan's books is attached to a dead man's gambling debts and scandal, and they won't care. They'll care, Eli. People always care. They care about who you were more than who you're trying to be." He looked at her for a long moment. "I don't," he said. Something shifted in her chest. Something she'd been keeping locked down for a very long time. "You should," she said quietly. "Probably. But I don't." She turned away from him because if she kept looking at his face, she was going to do something foolish, something like cry, or worse, something like hope. "I need time," she said, "to think. Take it. And if I decide to leave, then I'll know where to find you." She turned back. "What? You think I'm letting you disappear without a forwarding address?" Something almost like humor moved through his expression. "I know how far Charleston is, Clara. I can read a map." "You'd follow me." "I'd write first. I'm not uncivilized." She stared at him. He stared back. "You're a strange man, Elijah Dawson." "I've been told." "By whom?" "My horse. Captain Margaret." He paused. "Now you." "Good company." "The best." She laughed. It came out broken and wet, but it was real, and he smiled when he heard it. Not a big smile, just the edges of one. But it was there. "Don't leave yet," he said. "Give it a week. See what options you have." "I don't have options." "You might. You don't know until you look. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that she'd been looking for options for 2 years and hadn't found any that didn't involve running or hiding or pretending to be someone she wasn't. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she said, 1 week. 1 week. He offered her his arm for the walk back to town. She took it. It was the first time she'd touched him deliberately, not by accident, not in passing. His arm was solid under her hand, warm through the cotton of his sleeve. She didn't let go until they reached the edge of the main street. And when she finally did, she felt the absence of it more than she expected. The week passed slowly. Clara worked. She counted inventory. She corrected Gus's arithmetic. She smiled at customers and made change and answered questions about fabric and flour and lamp oil. And she watched the door. Every time it opened, she expected to see a stranger. A man from Charleston, a lawyer, a sheriff with papers, someone who would look at her and see, not Clara the bookkeeper, but Clara Weston, widow of Edward Weston, liable for debts she hadn't known existed until a week ago. No one came. But the waiting was its own kind of torture. On Tuesday, Eli brought her wildflowers. He didn't make a ceremony of it, didn't present them with any particular flourish. He simply set them on the table at Miller's beside her coffee cup and said, "Saw these on the way down. Thought of you." Clara looked at them. Simple flowers, nothing fancy, the kind that grew wild on the hillsides. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why did these make you think of me?" He considered the question. They don't quit. Hottest summer in years, and they're still blooming. Seemed relevant. She picked one up, twirled it between her fingers. That's either a compliment or an observation about my stubbornness. Can't it be both? She smiled despite herself, despite everything. "Thank you," she said. "For the flowers, and for," she gestured vaguely, "everything else." "Haven't done anything else yet." "You've done more than you know." He looked at her with that steady, patient expression, the one that made her feel like he could see past all the walls she'd built. "Hearing anything about the letter?" he asked. "No, just waiting." "Waiting's hard." "Waiting's impossible. But what else can I do?" "You could let me help." "Eli, I know, you said no. I'm just reminding you the offer stands." "Why?" The question came out sharper than she intended. But she needed to know. She needed to understand why this man, this quiet, careful, damaged man, kept showing up, kept offering, kept looking at her like she was something worth keeping. "Because I've been where you are," he said. "Not the debts, but the feeling. The feeling that the past has you by the throat and won't let go. The feeling that no matter how far you run, it's always right behind you." He paused. "Someone helped me once, when I needed it. I never got to repay that. Maybe this is how I balance the ledger." "Who helped you?" "Doc Finch, after Margaret, after the baby." He looked down at his coffee. "I was in a bad way, worse than I let anyone see. Sam pulled me out of it, didn't ask permission, just did it." "How?" "Kept showing up. Every day for 3 months, didn't say much, just showed up. Made sure I was eating, made sure I was sleeping, made sure I hadn't." He stopped. Clara understood what he wasn't saying. "So this is you showing up," she said softly. "This is me showing up." She reached across the table and put her hand over his. He went very still. "Thank you," she said, "for showing up." He turned his hand under hers so that their palms were touching. His fingers closed gently around hers. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. Then Gus Brennan's voice cut through from across the street. "Miss Clara, customer needs you." She pulled her hand back reluctantly. "Duty calls." "Go. I'll be here Thursday." "You're always here Thursday." "Reckon I am." She stood, gathered the wildflowers, and walked back toward the store. At the door, she looked back. He was still watching her. She raised the flowers slightly. A small acknowledgement. A small thank you. He tipped his hat. And Clara went back to work carrying something in her chest that felt dangerously close to hope. Sheriff Daniel Crane came into Brennan's on Wednesday afternoon. Clara had seen him around town, of course. Hard not to notice the sheriff. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered with a thick mustache and the confident stride of someone used to being obeyed. She'd never spoken to him directly. "Miss Clara," he said, leaning against the counter. "We haven't been properly introduced. Daniel Crane." "I know who you are, Sheriff. And I know who you are, the woman who fixed Gus's books." He smiled. "Whole town's talking about it. Whole town needs better topics of conversation." He laughed. It was a pleasant sound, she supposed. The kind of laugh designed to make people feel comfortable. It didn't make her feel comfortable. "I was wondering if you might join me for supper tonight," he said. "At the hotel. They do a decent steak." Clara looked at him. "I appreciate the offer, Sheriff, but I'll have to decline." "Previous engagement." "Something like that." "With the rancher Dawson?" She felt herself stiffen. "Is that relevant?" "Just making conversation. Man comes to town twice a week for coffee with the same woman people notice. People should mind their own business. In a small town, impossible." He smiled again, but there was something harder underneath it now. "I'm just saying, Miss Clara, if you're looking for stability, a man with a position, a future, there are options closer to town than that ridge. I'll keep that in mind." "You do that." He tipped his hat. "Offer stands. Whenever you're ready." He left. Clara stood behind the counter, her hands shaking slightly. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was something else. Something that felt like the walls closing in. The town noticing. The town watching. The town having opinions about who she spent time with and what it meant. She had been invisible for 2 years. Anonymous. Safe. She wasn't invisible anymore. When she told Eli about the sheriff's visit on Thursday, his expression didn't change. But something in his eyes did. "Crane's a decent enough man," he said carefully. "That's not what your face says." "My face says a lot of things I don't mean." "Does it?" "I'm starting to think your face is the most honest part of you." He looked at her. "What did you tell him?" "No." "Just no?" "What else should I have said?" "Nothing. No is enough." He paused. "Is it enough for you?" Clara set down her coffee cup. "What are you asking me, Eli?" "I'm asking if you're interested." "In Crane." "In stability." "In—" "I'm not interested in Daniel Crane." "All right." "I'm not interested in stability either. Not the kind he's offering." "What kind are you interested in?" She looked at him across the table, at his steady eyes, his weathered hands, the gray at his temples, and the patience in the lines around his mouth. "The kind that doesn't feel like a cage," she said. "The kind that lets me be who I am, instead of who someone thinks I should be." "And who are you?" "I don't know yet. I'm still figuring it out." She leaned forward slightly. "But I know who I'm not. I'm not the woman who marries a man because he has a position. I did that once. It nearly destroyed me." "Crane's not Edward." "No, but I'm not the woman who needs to be saved anymore either. Whatever happens with that letter with the debts with Charleston, I need to handle it myself. On my own terms." Eli was quiet for a long moment. "I understand that," he said finally. "I respect it." "But, no but. I understand it. I respect it." He looked at her. "I just want you to know that handling something yourself doesn't mean handling it alone. There's a difference. A big one. Handling it yourself means making your own choices. Handling it alone means refusing help even when it's offered freely." He paused. "I'm offering freely, Clara. No strings, no expectations, no cage." She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes and blink them back fiercely. "Why?" she asked again. The same question she'd asked before, the question she couldn't stop asking. "Because I spent 8 years handling everything alone," he said, "and I'm tired of it, and maybe—" He stopped, looked away, looked back. "Maybe I don't want you to make the same mistake I did." "What mistake?" "Thinking that needing people is weakness. Thinking that letting someone in means losing yourself." He shook his head slowly. "Margaret tried to tell me. Before. She said I held people at arm's length because I was afraid. I told her she was wrong, but she wasn't. She never was." Clara reached across the table again, took his hand again. This time she didn't let go when Gus called her name. "I'm scared," she said quietly. "Of what?" "Of needing you. Of wanting." She stopped herself. "Wanting what?" "Things I shouldn't want. Things that don't make sense. Things that could break me worse than Edward ever did." Eli's hand tightened around hers. "Clara, look at me." She looked. "I'm not going to break you," he said. "I'm not capable of it. You know why. Why? Because you're not breakable. You bend. You adjust. You survive. That's what you do. That's who you are." He paused. "And anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time." She laughed. It was a wet, broken sound. "You really believe that?" "I really do." "Miss Clara." Gus's voice was getting impatient now. She squeezed Eli's hand once more, then let go. "Thursday," she said. "Thursday." She walked back to work. But something had shifted. Something had opened. Something that had been locked tight for 2 years was slowly, carefully beginning to unlock. The second letter arrived on Friday. This one wasn't from a lawyer. This one was worse. Clara recognized the handwriting immediately. Neat, precise, familiar. The handwriting of James Mercer, Edward's business partner. The man who had introduced them. The man who had stood at their wedding and smiled and known she was certain of it now exactly what kind of man Edward really was. She opened it in the back room, her hands trembling. "Dear Mrs. Weston, I understand you have received correspondence regarding your late husband's outstanding obligations. I also understand you have relocated to Texas to a small town called Stillwater Creek. I will be arriving within the fortnight to discuss matters in person. There are options available to you that the lawyers may not have mentioned. Options that could resolve your difficulties entirely. I trust you will receive me with the courtesy appropriate to our long acquaintance. Yours sincerely, James Mercer." Clara read it 3 times. Then she sat down heavily on a crate of dry goods and tried to remember how to breathe. James Mercer was coming. James Mercer, who had smiled at her wedding and known. James Mercer, who had options. She knew what his options would be. She knew exactly what kind of resolution he had in mind. He had made it clear enough in Charleston in the months after Edward's death, when he had appeared at her door with condolences that felt more like propositions. She had refused him then. She had run instead. And now he was following. She pressed her hands against her eyes and tried to think. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks before he arrived. 2 weeks to figure out what to do. 2 weeks to decide whether to run again farther, this time faster, or to stay and face whatever was coming. She thought about Eli, about his steady eyes, and his patient hands, and his offer of help with no strings attached. She thought about the ridge, about the life she could almost imagine there. She thought about Margaret's name spoken aloud in the present tense, like she was allowed to still exist. And she thought about James Mercer's smile at her wedding, knowing, always knowing, and never saying a word. She stood up, smoothed her dress, walked back to the counter. She had 2 weeks. That would have to be enough. She told Eli on Sunday. They were sitting on the porch of Widow Cole's boarding house, the evening heat still pressing down, even as the sun dropped low. Clara had the letter in her pocket. She'd been carrying it for 2 days, the paper softening from the constant contact with her hand. "There's something else," she said. Eli looked at her, waited. "A man is coming. From Charleston. Edward's business partner. She pulled the letter out and handed it to him. He says he has options for me. Eli read it slowly. When he finished, his jaw was tight. What kind of options? The kind I've refused before. Meaning he wants something I'm not willing to give. Eli folded the letter carefully. His hands were steady, but something in his eyes had gone cold. When? 2 weeks, maybe less. Does he know where you're staying? He knows I'm in Stillwater Creek. The rest won't be hard to figure out. Clara took the letter back. I should leave, before he gets here. If I'm gone, he has no reason to stay. And go where? I don't know. West? California maybe? Running again? Surviving again. Eli stood up, walked to the edge of the porch, stood there with his back to her for a long moment. What if you didn't? He said. Didn't what? Didn't run. What if you stayed and faced him? With what I have? Nothing, Eli. No money, no power, no... You have me. She went still. He turned around. You have me, and Gus, and Widow Cole, and half this town that's watched you work yourself to the bone for the past month. He walked back to her. You're not alone anymore, Clara. You keep forgetting that. I'm not forgetting. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From him. From whatever he's planning. From the mess that follows me everywhere I go. I don't need protection. Everyone needs protection from James Mercer. He's not like Edward. Edward was weak. James is... She stopped, searched for the word. Calculating. Everything he does has a purpose. Every smile, every kindness, every offer. There's always something underneath. What does he want from you? Clara looked away. I think you can guess. Eli's expression darkened. Say it. He wants me. He's wanted me since before Edward died. Maybe before I even married Edward. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I think he introduced us on purpose. I think he knew Edward would destroy himself eventually. I think he's been waiting. Waiting for what? For me to have nowhere else to go. The words hung in the air. Eli crossed to her, took her hands. His grip was firm, warm, certain. Listen to me, he said. I don't care what he thinks he's owed. I don't care what options he thinks he has. You're not a debt to be collected. You're not property to be claimed. His voice was low and tense. You're Clara, and you don't belong to anyone but yourself. She felt tears threatening again. You make it sound simple. It is simple. He can want whatever he wants. Doesn't mean he gets it. You don't know him. I don't need to know him. I know you. I know what you survived. I know what you're capable of. He squeezed her hands. Stay. Face him. And let me stand beside you when you do. Clara looked at him for a long moment. Why? She whispered. Why do you keep fighting for me? Because someone should. Because you deserve it. Because... He stopped. Something crossed his face. Something raw and unguarded. Because I'm not ready to lose you yet. The word yet hit her like a physical blow. Yet. I didn't mean. You said yet. He closed his eyes briefly, opened them. I meant ever. I'm not ready to lose you ever, Clara. Is that clear enough? She couldn't breathe. Eli. I know it's too soon. I know we've only known each other a month. I know there's a man coming from Charleston and debts you can't pay, and 100 reasons why this doesn't make sense. He was still holding her hands. But I stopped making sense the day you laughed at me on those steps, and I don't particularly want to start again. She pulled one hand free. He let her. She reached up and touched his face. Just once, just briefly, her fingers against his jaw. 1 month, she said quietly, and you already know me better than Edward did in 5 years. Is that a yes? It's a maybe, it's a let me think, it's a... She laughed softly. It's a please don't let me go. He didn't. James Mercer arrived 11 days later, Clara was behind the counter at Brennan's when the stagecoach pulled in. She didn't see him get off, but she felt something shift in the air the way animals feel a storm coming before the first cloud appears. She knew before Gus even spoke. "Miss Clara, there's a gentleman here asking for you." She looked up, and there he was. James Mercer looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, slim, impeccably dressed even after days of travel. Dark hair silvering at the temples, a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Clara," he said, "you look well." "Mr. Mercer?" "James, please, after everything we've been through." "What do you want?" He glanced at Gus, who was watching the exchange with obvious curiosity. "Perhaps somewhere more private?" "Here is fine." Something flickered in his expression. Annoyance quickly suppressed. "As you wish." He set his hat on the counter. "I've come to help you, Clara. The debts, the legal troubles, all of it can go away. I have the means to make it disappear. In exchange for what? Your company, your consideration." He smiled. "I'm not asking for anything unreasonable, just the opportunity to discuss our future. We don't have a future. We could." He stepped closer. "You've been alone for 2 years now. Running, hiding, scraping by. That's no life for a woman of your breeding. Come back east with me. Let me take care of you. Let me give you back everything Edward took." "You mean everything you helped him take?" His smile didn't waver, but something cold moved behind his eyes. "I don't know what you mean." "You knew what he was. You knew, and you introduced us anyway. You stood at our wedding and smiled, and you knew exactly what kind of man I was marrying." "Clara, did you plan it? Was I always supposed to end up like this, desperate enough to take whatever you offered?" "You're upset. I understand. The heat, the stress. Don't." She leaned forward across the counter. "Don't pretend you care about my feelings. Don't pretend you're here out of kindness. You're here because you think I'm out of options. You're here because you think I'm trapped." "Aren't you?" The question hung in the air. "No," Clara said. "I'm not. The debts are my problem, not yours, not anymore. You can't pay them. Maybe not. But I'd rather lose everything than be owned by you." For the first time his mask slipped, just for a moment, just long enough for her to see the anger underneath. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Probably. I've made them before. I'll survive." "Will you?" He picked up his hat. "I'll be at the hotel. When you come to your senses, you know where to find me." "Don't wait up." He turned and walked out. Clara realized her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the counter until the trembling stopped. Gus was staring at her. "Miss Clara, you all right?" "Fine," she said. "I'm fine." She wasn't. But she would be. She had to be. Eli rode into town an hour later. He found her sitting on Miller's bench staring at nothing. The wildflowers he'd given her last week were in a small jar at her elbow, wilting in the heat. "He's here," she said before he could ask. "I saw the stage come in." He sat down beside her. "What happened?" He offered to make everything go away. Debts, legal troubles, all of it. And I told him no. Something relaxed in Eli's shoulders. "Good. He's not going to give up." "I know. He's angry. He doesn't show it, but I could see it. He's not used to being refused. Then he's about to get an education." Clara almost smiled. "You sound confident." "I am confident." "Why?" "Because you already made the hard choice. Everything else is just follow-through." He reached over and took her hand. "I'm proud of you." "I haven't done anything yet." "You said no. That's something. That's everything." She leaned into him slightly, just for a moment, just enough to feel the solid warmth of him beside her. "He'll try again," she said. "Let him. He's not going to go away quietly. Neither am I." She turned and looked at him, at his steady eyes, his weathered face, the certainty in every line of him. I don't deserve you, she said. Yes, you do. Eli. You do. Stop arguing. He squeezed her hand. Now, what's our next move? James Mercer came to Brennan's every day for a week. Each time he was polite, courteous, perfectly civil. He bought supplies he didn't need, made conversation with Gus, smiled at Clara across the counter like they were old friends catching up. Each time Clara refused to engage, and each time the anger behind his eyes grew a little more visible. On the 7th day, he changed tactics. I've been asking around, he said casually, examining a bolt of fabric he had no intention of purchasing. About your friend, the rancher. Clara's hands went still. Dawson, is it? Elijah Dawson, widower, lost his wife and child some years back. James set down the fabric. Tragic story, very tragic. What are you doing? Just conversation, making friends. He smiled. This is a friendly town. People talk. They told me all sorts of interesting things. Leave him out of this. Out of what? I'm simply getting to know the community. He leaned against the counter. Did you know his ranch has been struggling? The drought last year hit him hard. He's extended with the bank. Clara felt cold despite the heat. That's not your concern. Everything about you is my concern, Clara, including the company you keep. He straightened. I wonder what would happen if someone bought up his debt, called it in. These frontier banks are so flexible about such arrangements. You wouldn't. I would. I will. Unless you reconsider my offer. Clara stared at him. You're threatening to destroy an innocent man to get to me. I'm presenting options. I told you I had them. He picked up his hat. Think about it. I'm a patient man, but my patience has limits. He walked out. Clara stood frozen behind the counter. Then she grabbed her shawl and ran. She found Eli at the livery talking to the blacksmith about shoeing one of his horses. He looked up when she came rushing in, breathless and wild-eyed. Clara, what's wrong? We need to talk, now. He excused himself from the blacksmith and followed her outside. What happened? He's going to buy your debt. From the bank. He's going to call it in and take everything. Eli went very still. He told you this. Just now. He said unless I reconsider his offer, he'll destroy you. Her voice cracked. I won't let him, Eli. I won't let him use you against me. Clara. I'll go with him. I'll go back to Charleston. Whatever he wants, I'll... Stop. He took her by the shoulders. Stop. Look at me. She looked. You're not going anywhere with him. But your ranch is not worth your life, is not worth your freedom. His grip tightened. You hear me? Nothing I have is worth that. You've built everything on that land. Margaret would haunt me until the end of my days if I let you sacrifice yourself for a piece of property. His voice was rough. She'd never forgive me. I'd never forgive me. Then what do? We fight. How? He has money connections, lawyers. And we have something he doesn't. What? People. Eli released her shoulders. He's one man in a town full of people who've watched you work, watched you help, watched you become part of this community. He thinks he can buy his way through anything. But you can't buy what this town has to offer. You can't buy loyalty. You think they'd stand with me against him? I think they already are. They just don't know it yet. Clara shook her head. It's too risky. If it doesn't work, then we lose together. That's how it works when you're not alone anymore. He took her hand. I told you I'd stand beside you. I meant it. Whatever comes. She looked at him for a long moment. You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the most foolish. Probably both. Margaret always said they were hard to tell apart in me. Clara laughed. It was wet and shaky, but it was real. All right, she said. We fight. We fight. How do we start? Eli smiled. It was not a gentle smile. It was the smile of a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. "First," he said, "we talked to Doc Finch. He knows everyone's business in this town. If there's dirt on Mercer to be found, Sam will know where to dig. And second, we pay a visit to Sheriff Crane." Clara blinked. "Crane? He's been interested in you." "I know, but he's also the law, and threatening to destroy a man's livelihood to coerce a woman." Eli shook his head. "That's the kind of thing sheriffs tend to frown upon." "You think he'll help?" "I think he'll help for 2 reasons. 1, it's his job. 2, if he doesn't, and word gets out that he let a rich outsider run roughshod over local folks." Eli's smile sharpened. "He'll never get re-elected." Clara stared at him. "You've thought about this?" "I've had a week. I think fast when I need to." "Eli Dawson, you're full of surprises." "You have no idea." He offered her his arm. "Come on. We've got a town to organize." She took his arm, and together they walked back into the light. Doc Samuel Finch listened without interrupting. He sat in his office chair with his fingers steepled under his chin, his eyes moving between Clara and Eli as they told him everything. The debts, the letters, James Mercer's threats, the ultimatum. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "How long have you known this man?" he asked Clara. 7 years. Since before I married Edward. And you believe he planned this from the beginning?" "I believe he saw an opportunity and waited for it to ripen." Sam nodded slowly. "I've seen men like that. Patient predators. They don't chase, they position themselves and let circumstances do the work." He looked at Eli. "You're sure about the bank threat?" "He told her directly. Said he'd buy up my debt and call it in." "That's extortion." "It's also hard to prove." "Maybe." Sam stood up and walked to his window. "But here's the thing about men like Mercer. They're careful, calculating. They don't make threats unless they're confident they can follow through, which means he's already been to the bank, already made inquiries." Clara felt her stomach drop. "You think he's already started?" "I think we need to find out." Sam turned back to them. "Harold Fletcher runs the bank. He and I play chess every Saturday. He owes me money from a bet on last year's cattle drive." A thin smile crossed his face. "I think it's time to collect." "You do that?" Clara asked. "Get involved in this?" "Miss Clara, I've watched Eli spend 8 years building walls around himself, building a life that kept everyone at arm's length." Sam looked at his old friend. "First time I've seen those walls come down. First time I've seen him fight for something other than survival." He looked back at Clara. "Whatever you've done to him, I'm grateful. So yes, I'll get involved. Gladly." Eli said nothing, but something moved in his expression. Something that looked like gratitude mixed with embarrassment. "Go see Crane," Sam said. "I'll handle Fletcher. Meet me at Miller's in 2 hours." They found Sheriff Daniel Crane at his office cleaning a rifle that didn't need cleaning. He looked up when they walked in. His expression shifted when he saw them together, Eli's hand at Clara's back, the way they moved as a unit. "Miss Clara, Dawson." His voice was carefully neutral. "What brings you by?" "We need your help," Clara said. "Official business?" "You could call it that," she told him. "Not everything. Not the history with Edward, not the full weight of what Mercer wanted from her, but enough. The threats, the extortion, the plan to destroy Eli's livelihood as leverage." Crane listened. His expression didn't change, but his grip on the rifle tightened. "You're saying this Mercer fellow threatened to ruin Dawson financially unless you agreed to—" "What exactly?" "Go back to Charleston with him." "As his wife?" "As his property." Crane set down the rifle. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." "Can you prove it?" "He said it to my face. In Brennan's store. Gus heard part of it." "Part of it isn't all of it." Crane leaned back in his chair. "Look, Miss Clara, I believe you. I do. But belief and evidence are different things. If I confront Mercer based on your word alone, he'll deny it. He'll make you look like a hysterical woman making up stories, and then he'll have ammunition against you. Clara felt frustration rising. So we do nothing. I didn't say that. Crane stood up. I said I can't confront him directly. Not yet. But I can make his life uncomfortable. I can pay attention. I can make sure he knows the law is watching. He walked around his desk. And I can do something else. What? I can tell you what I know about him. Clara and Eli exchanged glances. You know something? Eli asked. I sent a telegram to Charleston 2 days ago, after I saw him arrive. A man that well-dressed traveling that far for a woman he claims is just an old friend. Crane shook his head. Didn't sit right with me. What did you find? James Mercer is under investigation back east. Financial improprieties. Fraud. The authorities haven't moved on him yet because they're building a case, but the walls are closing in. Crane looked at Clara. He's not here just for you, Miss Clara. He's here because Charleston is about to become very uncomfortable for him. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. He's running, she said slowly. He's running, and he wants to take me with him. That'd be my guess. A wife can't testify against her husband. And if he's got you legally bound to him before the investigation goes public, I become his shield. And his alibi. Crane nodded. Whatever he's planning, it's bigger than old debts and romantic interests. You're part of his exit strategy. Clara sat down heavily in the chair behind her. This whole time, she said quietly, I thought he wanted me because of some twisted obsession. But it's practical. It's all practical. That doesn't make it better, Eli said. No. But it makes it clearer. She looked up at Crane. What do we do with this information? We use it. Carefully. Mercer doesn't know I've been asking questions. He doesn't know what I know. That's an advantage. Crane crossed his arms. Keep him talking. Keep him confident. And when he makes his next move, we'll be ready. What if his next move is going to the bank? Then we make sure the bank isn't receptive. Doc Finch is working on that, Eli said. Crane raised an eyebrow. Sam's involved. He insisted. Good. Sam knows everybody's secrets in this town. If anyone can convince Harold Fletcher to think twice, it's him. Crane looked at Clara. You've got more allies than you know, Miss Clara. This town takes care of its own. I'm not from this town. You are now. 2 hours later, they gathered at Miller's. Doc Finch was already there, nursing a coffee that had gone cold. His expression was grim. What did Fletcher say? Eli asked as they sat down. Mercer's already been to see him, made inquiries about Eli's debt, made an offer to buy it. Clara's heart sank. He accepted? Not yet, but he was considering it. Mercer offered above value, significantly above. Sam looked at Eli. Harold's a businessman. He's not going to turn down money out of sentiment. So we're too late, Clara said. I didn't say that. Sam leaned forward. I told Harold about the investigation in Charleston, about the fraud charges that are coming, about what happens to a small-town banker who does business with a man under federal investigation. What did he say? He said he needed to think about it, said he'd give me an answer by tomorrow morning. Sam sat back. It's not a guarantee, but it's a chance. A chance, Eli repeated. That's more than we had this morning. There's something else. Sam's expression darkened. Fletcher mentioned something Mercer said, casually, like he didn't realize the weight of it. What? He asked about marriage licenses, about how quickly they could be arranged in a frontier town, about whether there were religious officials who might be persuaded to expedite things. Clara felt ice in her veins. He's planning to marry me. Here, before anyone can stop him. That's what it sounds like. I haven't agreed to anything. I've refused him repeatedly. How can he possibly think? Because he doesn't care about your agreement, Eli said quietly. He cares about the paperwork. If he can get you in front of a preacher, get your name on a document, it doesn't matter what you actually want. That's not legal. It's legal enough to create chaos, legal enough to complicate things, legal enough to buy him time to get you on a stage back east before anyone sorts out what actually happened. Eli's jaw was tight. I've seen it before, during the war. Men who took what they wanted and let the lawyers figure it out afterward. Clara stood up abruptly. I won't let him. I won't. You won't have to. Eli stood with her. We know what he's planning now. That means we can stop it. How? We don't leave you alone, not for a moment, not until this is resolved. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm telling. He took her hands. Clara, look at me. She looked. I lost Margaret because I couldn't protect her, because the thing that took her wasn't something I could fight. His voice was rough. This is different. This is a man I can stand against, a man I can stop. His grip tightened. Let me do this, please. She felt tears threatening again. Eli, let me protect what I love. The word hung in the air between them. Love. He had said it, out loud, in front of Sam Finch and whoever else might be listening. You love me, she whispered. I thought that was obvious. You never said it. I'm saying it now. He pulled her closer. I love you, Clara. I don't care about your past, your debts, or the man who's chasing you. I love you, and I will stand between you and anyone who tries to take you from this town. From me. She kissed him, right there in Miller's, in front of God and Sam Finch and anyone else who happened to be watching. When she pulled back, his eyes were wide. Was that a yes? He asked. That was an I love you too. Sam Finch cleared his throat loudly. If you two are finished, we have a snake to catch. James Mercer made his move the next morning. Clara was opening Brennan's when he appeared in the doorway. This time, he wasn't alone. He had two men with him, rough-looking, the kind of men who worked for money and didn't ask questions. Good morning, Clara, Mercer said pleasantly. I've come to collect your answer. My answer hasn't changed. I think it has. I think you've had time to consider your position. Time to realize that your frontier friends can't help you. Time to understand that I always get what I want. Is that so? It is. He stepped into the store. The two men followed. I've arranged for a minister to meet us at the hotel in 1 hour. We'll be married by noon and on the afternoon stage by 2. Your debts will be settled. Your rancher friend will keep his land, and everyone will live happily ever after. Except me. You'll learn to be happy. Women do. Clara felt rage building in her chest. Get out of my store. Your store? Mercer laughed. This isn't your store, Clara. Nothing here is yours. You own nothing. You have nothing. You are nothing except what I choose to make you. I said get out. And if I don't? He gestured to the men behind him. These gentlemen are here to ensure our wedding proceeds smoothly. They've been paid very well to handle any objections. Clara's hand moved toward the counter. Toward the small pistol Gus kept beneath the cash box. I wouldn't, Mercer said. Even if you managed to use it, you'd hang for murder. And I'd still win. You won't win anything. I already have. Don't you see, this was over before it started. You just didn't know it yet. The door behind them opened. Eli walked in. He wasn't alone either. Behind him came Sheriff Crane Doc Finch and 6 other men Clara recognized from town. The blacksmith, the livery owner, 2 ranchers she'd helped with their accounts. Gus Brennan himself, clutching a shotgun he probably didn't know how to fire. Mercer turned slowly. What is this? This is Stillwater Creek, Crane said. And you're not welcome here. I'm a free citizen. I can go where I please. Not when you're threatening our people, you can't. Crane stepped forward. I've got a telegram from Charleston Mercer, from the federal prosecutor's office. They're very interested in your whereabouts. Very interested in having a conversation about certain financial irregularities. Something flickered in Mercer's expression, the first crack in his composure. I don't know what you're talking about. Then you won't mind waiting while I send word that you're here. Should only take a day or two for someone to come collect you. This is ridiculous. I'm simply here to marry an old friend. Against her will, Eli said. That's not marriage. That's kidnapping. She agreed. I never agreed to anything, Clara said. Her voice was steady now. I refused you, repeatedly. You responded with threats and coercion. These men, she gestured to Mercer's hired muscle, are here to force me to comply. That's not a wedding. That's a crime. Mercer's mask finally slipped entirely. You stupid woman. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? I offered you everything. Comfort, security, a name that still means something. Your name means fraud and federal investigation, Crane said. It's about to mean prison. That investigation will go nowhere. Maybe, maybe not. But here's what I know for certain. Crane stepped closer to Mercer, close enough that the smaller man had to look up at him. If you're still in this town by sundown, I'm going to arrest you. For extortion, for attempted kidnapping, for whatever else I can make stick. You don't have evidence. I have witnesses. Half a dozen of them standing right behind me. Crane smiled. It wasn't friendly. Your hired men can either leave now and keep their freedom, or they can stay and share your cell. Their choice. The two men exchanged glances. One of them shrugged. He paid in advance, the man said. Job's done far as I'm concerned. They walked out without looking back. Mercer stood alone. For the first time, Clara saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. The fear of a man who had always controlled everything finally confronted with something he couldn't control. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. Clara walked out from behind the counter. She stopped directly in front of him. Listen to me carefully, James. I am not your property. I am not your solution. I am not your wife, your shield, or your exit strategy. She held his gaze. I am Clara Weston. I survived my father's death. I survived Edward's destruction. I survived 2,000 miles of running and hiding and starting over. And I will survive you. Mercer said nothing. Now get out of my town. He left. Clara watched him walk to the hotel, collect his bags, and board the next stage heading east. She stood in the doorway until the stage disappeared around the bend. Then her knees buckled. Eli caught her before she hit the ground. I've got you, he said. I've got you. She buried her face in his chest and let the tears come. 8 years of running. 2 years of hiding. Months of fear and uncertainty and watching over her shoulder. It was over. It was finally, impossibly, blessedly over. The town threw a party that night. Not officially, nobody called it a celebration of James Mercer's departure. But there was music at the saloon and dancing in the street, and enough whiskey flowing to float a riverboat. Clara sat on Miller's bench with Eli beside her watching the festivities. You should be out there, she said, celebrating with everyone else. I'm exactly where I want to be. Sitting on a bench. Sitting with you. He put his arm around her shoulders. Everything else is just noise. She leaned into him. Thank you for everything. I didn't do anything. You saved yourself. I couldn't have done it alone. Maybe not. But you did the hard part. You stood up. You refused to break. He pressed a kiss to her temple. That was all you, Clara. She was quiet for a moment. What happens now? She asked. What do you mean? Mercer's gone. The immediate crisis is over. What happens to this? She gestured between them. Us. Eli was quiet for a long moment. I have a proposition, he said finally. Oh. Come to the ridge, tomorrow. Let me show you what it looks like in summer. I've seen it. You've seen bits of it. I want to show you all of it. The meadow where the wildflowers grow, the creek where I fish, the spot where you can see 3 counties at once. He turned to look at her. I want you to see it the way Margaret saw it, the way I see it, as home. Clara's breath caught. Are you asking me what I think you're asking? I'm asking you to consider it, that's all. Consider what it might look like living up there, with me. He paused. I know it's soon. I know we've only known each other 2 months. I know there are 100 practical reasons why it doesn't make sense. But I've spent 8 years alone on that ridge. 8 years of practical decisions and sensible choices and keeping everyone at arm's length. His voice was rough. I don't want to be sensible anymore, Clara. I want to be happy. And you make me happy. She reached up and touched his face. Yes, she said. Yes, you'll come to the ridge? Yes, to all of it. She smiled through tears she hadn't realized were falling. Yes, I'll come to the ridge. Yes, I'll consider it. Yes, I'll... He kissed her. This time it was slow, gentle, a promise of something more. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow. Clara rode up to the ridge the next morning with her heart pounding against her ribs. Eli had come to collect her at dawn. He'd brought a horse from his own stable, a gentle mare he called Penny, and they'd taken the trail together in comfortable silence. But as they climbed higher, as the town disappeared below them and the land opened up around them, Clara felt something shifting inside her, something that had been locked tight for years, slowly beginning to unlock. You're quiet, Eli said. I'm thinking. About how strange life is. 2 months ago, I was sitting on Brennan's steps with 11 cents in my pocket and no idea what would happen next. She looked at him. Now I'm riding up a mountain with a man who says he loves me. I don't just say it. I mean it. I know. That's what's strange. She shook her head. I stopped believing in this kind of thing, Eli. After Edward. After everything. I told myself love was a fairy tale people used to justify bad decisions. And now I'm not sure what I believe, except that you're real. This is real, and I don't want to lose it. Eli brought his horse alongside hers, close enough that their knees almost touched. You won't lose it, he said. I don't let go of things easily. Ask Captain. She laughed. You're comparing me to a dog. Captain would be offended by that comparison. He's much more stubborn than you. They crested the final rise, and Clara pulled Penny to a stop. The valley spread out below them, green and gold in the summer light. She could see for miles. Counties, Eli had said. 3 of them visible from this one spot. This is what you wanted to show me, she asked. Part of it. Come on. He led her down a gentle slope to a meadow where wildflowers grew in impossible colors. Purple and yellow and white stretching out like a carpet someone had laid just for them. Margaret planted some of these, he said quietly. The first year we were married, she wanted color up here. Said the green was beautiful, but lonely. Clara felt something catch in her throat. You brought me to Margaret's flowers? I brought you to my home. Margaret's part of that. He dismounted, helped Clara down. I told you before she's not a ghost I'm trying to escape. She's a part of who I am, who I was. And if you're going to be part of my future, you need to understand that. I do understand. Do you? Because some women wouldn't. Some women would want me to forget her, to put away her things, stop saying her name, pretend those years didn't happen. Clara took his hands. I'm not some women. I know what it is to carry the past with you. I carry Edward not with love but with lessons. He taught me what I don't want, what I won't accept. She squeezed his fingers. Margaret taught you how to love. That's not something to hide. That's something to honor. Something moved in Eli's face, something deep and old and fragile. I wasn't sure, he said quietly. I wasn't sure you'd understand. I wasn't sure either. Until right now. She looked around at the meadow, at the flowers Margaret had planted, at the land Eli had built his life on. This place isn't haunted, Eli. It's loved. I can feel it. Can you feel yourself here, living here? The question hung in the air. Clara closed her eyes. She imagined mornings on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the valley wake up. Evenings by the fire, reading while Eli worked on his ledgers. Seasons changing years, passing a life unfolding in this quiet place. She imagined belonging somewhere. She opened her eyes. Yes, she said. I can. Eli let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a very long time. Then stay, he said. Not as a guest, not as someone passing through. Stay as my wife. Clara's heart stopped. Eli, I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. I know there are 1,000 reasons to wait. He pulled something from his pocket. A ring. Simple silver, worn with age. This was my mother's. She gave it to me before she died. Told me to give it to someone worthy. Eli, I don't... You're worthy, Clara. You're more than worthy. You're everything I stopped believing existed. His voice cracked slightly. I'm not asking you to answer right now. I'm asking you to think about it. To consider what this life could be. With me. Here. She looked at the ring. At his face. At the hope and fear and love written in every line of his expression. Can I ask you something first? She said. Anything. Why me? You could have anyone. You could have someone without baggage, without debts, without a past full of mistakes and bad decisions. Why choose the woman who showed up on Brennan's steps with nothing but a satchel and a worn-out boot heel? Eli was quiet for a moment. You remember the first thing I ever said to you? He asked. You asked if you could buy me something. And you laughed. You laughed like it was the funniest thing you'd heard in years. Like I was ridiculous. He shook his head slowly. Do you know how long it had been since anyone laughed at me? Clara really laughed. Not polite chuckles or social niceties. Real laughter. I wasn't laughing at you. I know. You were laughing at the situation. At the absurdity of it. At life being strange and unpredictable. He stepped closer. That's when I knew. Right there on those steps, I knew you were different. I knew you were real, and I knew that whatever it took, however long it took, I wanted to know you. Because I laughed. Because your laugh was honest. Because nothing about you was performance. Because you sat there with nothing and still had dignity. Still had yourself. He touched her face gently. I've spent 8 years around people who perform, who smile when they don't mean it, who say what's expected, who live their lives like scripts they didn't write. You don't do that. You're real. Messy and complicated and real. That's not exactly a compliment. It's the highest compliment I know how to give. Clara felt tears threatening again. She was getting tired of crying, but these tears felt different. These tears felt like release. Yes, she said. Eli blinked. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay. Yes to all of it. She laughed through her tears. Yes, you ridiculous, wonderful, patient man. Yes. He kissed her, right there in Margaret's meadow, surrounded by wildflowers and summer wind and the echo of years they'd both spent alone. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet too. I didn't expect you to say yes, he admitted. What did you expect? More questions, more hesitation, more time. I've spent 2 years hesitating. 2 years being afraid. 2 years running from everything good because I was scared it would turn bad. She touched his face. I'm done running, Eli. I'm done being afraid. I'm ready to stop and stay and build something that lasts. Even if it's hard. Especially if it's hard. The easy things never meant anything. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. My mother would have liked you. he said. What makes you say that? She was stubborn too. Clara laughed. Is everyone in your family stubborn? It's a prerequisite. Captain will have to approve you officially, of course. Of course. I wouldn't dream of bypassing Captain. They stood there for a long moment, hands intertwined, looking out at the valley below. At the town where they'd met. At the road that had brought her here from 2,000 miles away. One more thing, Eli said. What? The debts. The money you owe in Charleston. I want to pay it. Eli, no. We talked about this. We talked about it when we weren't engaged. Things are different now. He turned to face her. I have the money. Not a fortune, but enough. And I want to do this. Not because you need saving. Not because I think you can't handle it yourself. But because we're partners now. Your debts are my debts. Your problems are my problems. That's what marriage means. Clara hesitated. Every instinct she had screamed against accepting, against being obligated, against owing anyone anything. But this wasn't anyone. This was Eli. And owing him wasn't the same as owing the world. All right, she said quietly. But we pay it together, from the money we make together, as a partnership. Deal. And I keep working at Brennan's. I wouldn't dream of suggesting otherwise. Gus would fall apart without you. And we visit town twice a week, for coffee. 3 times, he countered. I like Miller's coffee. She smiled. 3 times. They married in September. Not a grand affair, neither of them wanted that. Just a small ceremony at the church in Stillwater Creek with the people who mattered most. Gus Brennan walked Clara down the aisle. Widow Cole cried into a handkerchief she'd embroidered specifically for the occasion. Doc Finch stood as Eli's best man, looking slightly uncomfortable in a jacket that didn't quite fit, but beaming with genuine joy. Even Sheriff Crane came. He sat in the back row, watching with an expression that was part regret and part acceptance. And when Eli and Clara emerged from the church as husband and wife, he was the first to tip his hat in congratulation. Take care of her, Dawson, he said. I intend to. And Clara? Crane paused. You chose well. I know, she said simply. The reception was held at Miller's. Someone had strung paper lanterns from the awning. Someone else had brought a fiddle. By evening, half the town was dancing in the street, and Clara found herself passed from partner to partner by men who'd stood in Brennan's doorway 2 months ago, ready to defend her from a man they'd never met. You're one of us now, the blacksmith said, as he twirled her clumsily past the livery. For better or worse? For better, Clara said. Definitely for better. Late that night, after the music had faded and the lanterns had been taken down, Eli drove Clara up the ridge in a wagon loaded with her belongings. All of them. The satchel that had held 11 cents. The dresses she'd mended and remended. The ledgers from Brennan's that Gus had insisted she keep as a wedding gift. Everything she owned, plus everything she'd become. The cabin was dark when they arrived, but Captain bounded out to meet them, tail wagging, entirely unimpressed by the solemnity of the occasion. He likes you, Eli said as the hound pressed against Clara's legs. He has good taste. He really does. Eli carried her over the threshold. It was old-fashioned and slightly ridiculous and exactly right. Welcome home, Mrs. Dawson, he said. Mrs. Dawson. Clara tested the name. I like it. You'd better. It's permanent. She kissed him. I'm counting on it. That first night they sat on the porch together and watched the stars come out over the valley. Captain lay at their feet, snoring softly. The summer air was warm, carrying the scent of wildflowers and pine. Can I tell you something? Clara said. Always. That first day, on Brennan's steps, when you asked if you could buy me something. I remember. I laughed because I had 11 cents in my satchel, because I'd just been thinking about my father's library worth more than this entire town, Because the contrast was so absurd I couldn't help it. She paused. But that's not the whole reason. No. I also laughed because you looked so uncomfortable, so out of your depth, like you'd rather be anywhere else in the world than standing there trying to talk to a strange woman on a set of steps. She turned to look at him. You were awkward, Eli. Genuinely terribly awkward. And I thought, here's someone real. Here's someone who doesn't know what he's doing either. Eli laughed softly. I definitely didn't know what I was doing. Neither did I. I still don't most of the time. But we figured it out together. We did. She rested her head against his shoulder. We really did. They sat in silence for a long moment. Margaret would have liked this, Eli said finally. Liked what? Me being happy, her being remembered without pain. He put his arm around Clara. She used to worry about me. Said I kept too much inside. Said one day I'd have to let someone in or I'd disappear entirely. She was right. She usually was. He pressed a kiss to Clara's hair. I think she'd have liked you too. You're nothing alike, but she would have recognized something in you. The stubbornness, the way you refuse to give up. Is that what this is, stubbornness? Partly. The rest is something better. What's that? Hope. He held her tighter. You made me hope again, Clara. I'd forgotten how. She felt tears prick at her eyes again. But these were good tears. Happy tears. The kind that came when something broken finally healed. Thank you, she said. For what? For asking if you could buy me something. For not giving up when I laughed. For coming back to town week after week, even when you didn't need salt blocks or lamp oil or anything else. I needed you. I just didn't know it yet. And now I know it. Every day, every moment. He turned her face toward his. I love you, Clara Dawson. Today. Tomorrow. For however many years we get. That's a long time. Not long enough. She kissed him, and in that kiss was everything the past they'd survived, the present they'd built, the future they'd chosen. Everything that mattered. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn. She lay there for a moment, listening to Eli breathe beside her, feeling the unfamiliar weight of the ring on her finger. The cabin was quiet. Captain was snoring somewhere in the other room. She slipped out of bed and padded to the window. The valley was just beginning to lighten. She could see the faint glow of sunrise on the eastern horizon, the first hint of color painting the sky. She thought about 11 cents, about Charleston and Edward and James Mercer and all the miles she'd traveled to reach this place. She thought about her father's library, sold piece by piece to pay debts that weren't hers. She thought about sitting on Brennan's steps, watching a street full of strangers, wondering if she'd made the right choice in running. And she thought about Eli, about coffee on Tuesdays and Thursdays, about wildflowers and steady eyes and the patience to wait while she figured out who she was. Can't sleep. She turned. Eli was sitting up in bed watching her. Just thinking, she said. About how far I've come. About how different everything is now. She crossed back to the bed, sat on the edge. About how glad I am that I stopped running. Eli reached for her hand. You know what I was thinking about. What? Breakfast. I'm starving. Clara laughed. You're impossible. Impossibly hungry. There's a difference. She pushed him back against the pillows and kissed him. Breakfast can wait, she said. Can it? It can. Later, much later, they sat on the porch with coffee and biscuits and watched the morning settle over the valley. Captain had claimed his spot between their chairs and was accepting scraps with the dignity of an animal who knew he deserved them. What do you want to do today? Eli asked. I don't know. What do people do when they're not running from their past or fighting off villains? They live, they build, they enjoy what they have. That sounds terrifying. It takes some getting used to. He smiled. But you'll manage. You're stubborn, remember? Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. Clara looked out at the valley, at the town below, waking up and beginning its day, at the road that wound down from the ridge, connecting this place to everywhere else. She thought about all the places that road led, all the places she'd been, all the places she'd never need to run to again. "I want to build something," she said suddenly. "What kind of something?" "I don't know yet. Something that lasts. Something that matters. Maybe help other women like me. Women who've lost everything and need a chance to start over." Eli looked at her. "That's a good idea." "You think so?" "I think you survived something most people wouldn't. I think that experience is worth sharing." He took her hand. "Whatever you want to build, I'll help you build it. Even if it's hard. Especially if it's hard. You said it yourself, the easy things never mean anything." Clara squeezed his hand. "I love you, Eli Dawson." "I know. That's not the response you're supposed to give." "I know that too." He grinned. "I also love you, Clara Dawson. Is that better?" "Much better." They sat there together, watching the day begin. Below them, Stillwater Creek was coming to life. Smoke rose from chimneys. Wagons began their morning routes. Somewhere Gus Brennan was probably already making arithmetic errors in his ledger errors that Clara would correct the next time she came to town. Her town now. Her people. Her home. Clara looked down at the ring on her finger, Eli's mother's ring worn smooth by years of love. She thought about that first morning on Brennan's steps, about 11 cents and a satchel and a laugh that had changed everything. She thought about asking herself over and over what she was running toward. Now she knew. Not a place, not a thing, not even safety. She'd been running toward this, toward him, toward a life that finally impossibly blessedly fit. "Ready?" Eli asked. "For what?" "For the rest of it, whatever it brings." Clara looked at him, at his steady eyes, his patient hands, the love written in every line of his face. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." And for the first time in 2 years, Clara Weston Dawson stopped running, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had finally found the one place she never wanted to leave.